Okay. Hi, everybody. Leticia here, coming to you this Thursday afternoon for another edition of my weekly Money Matters webinar series. And today's topic, as announced yesterday, is high cash flow real estate investing. And for those of you who have been looking for a way to supplement your income, bring some extra cash flow into your household, this is something you're going to want to pay attention to. And we have joining us on today's call, Rachel Alver. She is a leading expert on this strategy. Now, this particular real estate investing strategy is also known as rent-to-own investing. Those of you who are from the real estate investing community may have some knowledge of it. But even for those of you who have some knowledge of rent-to-own investing, Rachel is again seen as one of the, well, she truly is one of the most experienced rent-to-own investors in the country. And I would actually take a minute or two to just read Rachel's bio for you, just so you know who we have the honor of having as my guest today. And again, I would just want to say thanks again, Rachel, for joining us. I'm gonna read your bio in a second, and then I'll let you take it away from there. Okay, one sec. I have your bio. You sent it to me. Okay, so Rachel Alver is the co-host of Mothers of Real Estate TV show, and she's an award-winning rent-to-own investor. After 20 years of climbing the corporate ladder, Rachel embarked on a real estate investing journey. In 2009, she had her first rent-to-own investment property and has never looked back since then. Rachel is she's very passionate about helping families become homeowners and has been involved in more than 400 rent-to-own transactions across Ontario. Affectionately known as the cash flow queen, Rachel helps others profit with a purpose without the headaches of being a landlord. And this is one of the key things we're going to be talking about here, because I know many of you out there who are not already real estate investors have been thinking about it, but they're concerned about the headaches that may come with managing tenants, managing a property. You're going to learn that there's a way that you could have the best of both worlds. Rachel is the author of an Amazon best-selling book called Rent-to-Own Essential Guide for Home Buyers. Together with her husband, Rachel owns and operates Clover Properties, a leading Canadian rent-to-own company. So without further ado, thanks again, Rachel, for joining us. You may want to unmute your microphone.
Thanks very much for having me, Leticia.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And everyone, because we're live on Facebook, we may not be able, especially when Rachel starts sharing her slides, we may not be able to see your questions, but please don't be shy. Feel free to ask any questions you may have in the comment section, and Rachel will address those as soon as we can, okay?
Absolutely. I love questions, and I know there's probably not a single question that I've ever received that I get tired of answering. So I really love these types of opportunities where I can exchange knowledge with a live audience and enlighten you guys on some of the things you might not know, because rent-to-own is a really little understood strategy, especially by someone who's new to real estate investing. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely, Rachel. I mean, and by the way, everyone, how I met Rachel is I have actually known Rachel for a few years. She used to host a monthly, or it was at least monthly, I think it was bi-weekly even, real estate investing meetup called the Thornhill Wealth Forum, and she did that for a while. And that's the first time I even learned about rent-to-own and what the strategy involves. And Rachel is amazing at explaining it. So that's why I wanted to have Rachel on. And in addition to that, the way Rachel structures her rent-to-own transactions is really unique and allows for more profits for the investors, which is very generous and very nice for all of us who would get involved. And I've already referred some people to Rachel, and I don't have anybody currently on the line, but she can tell you all about her the success stories she's had.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've also prepared some numbers, because in case we have anyone tuning in who's a numbers person, I do have some slides, because talking about numbers without actually having something visual to refer to can be challenging. So I'm all set on that. So whenever we want to, I can get started. Let me know when you want to.
Thanks, share the slides. Absolutely. So should we perhaps start with even explaining to people what this strategy is all about? Do you want to just do maybe a minute just explaining to people? Because it's a bit of a buzzword when people hear rent-to-own. What does that even mean? So
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. So maybe the best way to explain the strategy is to kind of maybe explain my reason for doing it, because I'm going to share my slides because I kind of like this
Sure.
as a backdrop.
Yeah.
Far too often, I think people get involved with real estate investing when they haven't given full thought to what they're trying to get out of the strategy, the why behind it. And they just think, okay, real estate investing, I've got to do it. But where do you start? There's so many different categories. I mean, all of your guests represent in some way or another a new way of investing in real estate. And I was overwhelmed when I first got started. So one of the things that I found helpful was to take a step back and kind of think, why am I compelled to invest in real estate? What do I want out of it? Or actually, I started off with what I don't want. And what I didn't want was tenants and toilets. And a lot of investment strategies, unfortunately, really are about the tenants and toilets. And you have to wait a long time for the cash flow to kick in. But I wanted the opposite. I didn't want like to count pennies like a lot of my colleagues that I was meeting at these meetup groups and in networking events. They were kind of literally saying, you know, we're counting pennies, but we're investing for the long term. You know, traditionally, real estate investing is a long-term wealth building strategy. And I really respect that. And I truly value that. But for me, I really wanted to leave my job. I was working in the corporate world. I had a 2-year-old at home. Actually, I had just had a baby at that time. And I wanted to spend more time with my family. I had health challenges that put things into perspective. And my priority was really to master my time rather than give it away. And I thought, oh my gosh, well, I'll never be able to replace my job income counting pennies. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want that either. So I knew I didn't want tenants and toilets. I knew I didn't want to count pennies. So what did I want? Well, I wanted to say hello to cash flow. I knew if I invested for cash flow, then I would be in a much better position to have time freedom and to make choices about where to go with real estate investing once I had my immediate need and my immediate why satisfied. So rent to own ultimately satisfied this why for me. This was my reason for getting involved with the rent to own strategy. And the more I did it, the more I learned about real estate investing, the more I recognized that there's value in focusing. So ultimately, I became an expert on the strategy. But of course, I can't do all of the deals by myself. So I started becoming an expert on joint ventures. I became an expert on providing a service to other investors to help them leverage the strategy. So I started sharing my expertise to help others create this hello cash flow scenario. So rent to own, out of all the different investing strategies, is a cash flow rich strategy. So a traditional rental, as we know, it takes years for mortgage pay down to kick in and for, you know, the appreciation on a property to kind of kick in. And you start to see expenses going down and cash flow going up. And if you have, you know, 4, 5, 6 years of time to wait for that, I highly, highly recommend that approach. But there are some people like myself who need cash in their pocket today. So the minute that you take ownership of a rent-to-own property, you're cash flowing. And the cash flow can be anywhere from $600 a month to about $1,200 a month. And it's lucrative.
And I want to say, Rachel, again, there will be people watching this webinar who have never invested in real estate. So they may not be aware of the fact that with a traditional rental, and what we mean by a traditional rental, it's also known as the buy and hold strategy, where you buy a property, you may have to invest money up front in some renovations, and then you're going to have tenants paying your mortgage and hopefully the rest of the bills. In that type of scenario, ideally you want to be cash flowing, because you should never get into a property that you have to put money every month out of your pocket to. So you want to be cash flowing, but realistically, especially with the high property prices that we've seen anywhere, let's say in southwestern Ontario, it's very hard to cash flow beyond maybe $100, $200 a month. So if you're looking to replace your job income, or you're wanting to really bring more cash flow into your home sooner rather than later, that strategy may take some time to happen, unless you're buying, let's say, in smaller markets, perhaps not in the city where you're living. And then there are additional challenges that come with that, like managing a property farther away or what have you. Rachel's strategy, which is going to explain for us, creates much higher levels of cash flow from the get-go. You're not having to wait years for that mortgage pay down to happen. Okay, I hope I explained that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. And I mean, at the end of the day, a combined strategy, when you're talking about real estate investing and a well-rounded portfolio, you want to make sure that you have a balanced portfolio. And I didn't know what that meant for the longest term. For the longest time, I had no idea, and I was confused. But of course, once you get involved and you start focusing on this, I realized that a balanced portfolio actually means that you have cash flowing properties, like rent owns, and then you also have your long-term hold properties that are building your wealth, and creating that legacy for decades to come. And the two of them work in tandem very, very effectively. They actually complement each other. But sometimes people get tripped up on, well, I can't do both at the same time, so where do I start? So for me, cash flow was king. I really wanted to start with a cash flow rich strategy. And then I would figure out, okay, well, how do I use that cash flow to catapult myself into the longer buy, rent, hold game? And some people who invest through us end up coming to us after they have the tenant and toilet headaches, and they're tired of them, and they're like tired not seeing the cash flow. And midway, they realize, I'm not ready for that long-term hold and the responsibility of it. I want to change my focus and go back to make cash flow my priority, and then I'll get back into the wealth building game. So it's really about where you are on your specific journey and what you're trying to achieve. So that hopefully kind of sets the framework for what we're talking about. And I actually prepared a sample deal that we are in the middle of working on. And it's I'm excited about this one because it's in the GTA for those of the viewers who are joining us from the Greater Toronto area. They'll know Mississauga very, very well. And I wanted to kind of provide an overview of what that Mississauga deal looks like, to kind of drive home the numbers and explain a little bit about the deal structure. Is that okay?
Rachel, and I wanted to ask, is this a deal that you guys did yourselves, or is it for an investor client of yours?
Great question. So this is a deal that one of our investors is doing. In fact, this is their fourth rent-to-own property. They've been working with us since 2014, believe it or not. We've been doing this since 2009. Amazing. And we cannot possibly take every single deal on. So we have been working with investors that, like I said, they get out of each rent-to-own deal turns over within 3 years or 4 years on average. And most investors redeploy their funds and multiply how many rent-to-own deals.
And you're going to explain how that process works. So what I wanted to make clear, everyone, for everyone watching or listening, because Rachel and her husband have become experts in this strategy, and because they cannot possibly themselves do every deal in the market, they are now essentially helping other investors benefit from this strategy. And what this means to you is that if you're looking for a higher return on investment, and I know Rachel, she's very cautious and there are regulations, you're not allowed to talk about the ROI, but that being said, if you are looking to get your money working harder for you, and in particular, if you could use extra income coming into your household sooner rather than later with minimal hassles in terms of managing the actual property, managing the tenants, and you understand why that happens, this is an opportunity that's available for you as well. And Rachel will explain more about how she works with investors, what's involved on your side, and how you too could participate in the strategy, again, without you even needing to be the expert. Yes, you could try to go out there and do it yourself, but she's got it all down pat. So you'll understand.
Yeah, this is kind of like the all-inclusive version of doing an investment in the rent-to-own space. So you don't have to worry about anything other than qualifying for financing. You own the asset, and we do everything else from end to end. So it saves people a lot of time. So it creates that time freedom for a lot of people, because I know that for me, time freedom was a huge consideration. But when you're in the weeds of doing these deals, unfortunately, time freedom is not a luxury, because there's a learning curve, there's mistakes you make, and it took a lot of time. It took us a good 3 years to figure out how to do a rent-to-own deal end to end, and we thought we knew it all, but then we learned with every single deal there's something new. The real estate rules are always, the financing rules are always changing, how they affect the investor side, how they affect the home buyer side. The real estate market is constantly ebbing and flowing, and juggling all of these nuances really became a full-time job. And that's why my husband and I started focusing on this together as a service for other investors as of 2014. So it's been quite a journey. So this Mississauga sample that I'm going to be walking through is actually for investors that are working through us to get some cash flow. All right, so just to kind of put it into a perspective, this is a condo in the heart of Mississauga. It is a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom, so very unique layout, larger than your average condo, and it's close to all of the amenities. It's close to a university campus. It's close to transportation. It's close to the Square One Mall, and you know, all of these amenities are considered to add value to the real estate. And that's why these particular investors chose it. Plus they live in Mississauga. So this was kind of a serendipitous deal for them. And of course it was in their budget and just hit their numbers. So just to kind of give everyone a quick kind of bird's eye view on what this deal looks like, the purchase price on this condo is about $560 or for $560,000. And when you factor in all of the land transfer tax and legal fees, closing costs, our fees, the acquisition cost comes in at about $103,000. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, does that 103 reflect the big part of what rent-to-owns represent? And that's getting money as a down payment from the home buyers that you're trying to help. So I'm going to actually explain a little bit about how that works. But to answer that question, it already does reflect that. The monthly cash flow on this deal is about $1,023. And there's also a capital gain component. So when you calculate the profits from the cash flow and the profits from the capital gain, it actually adds up to about $131,518. So more than doubling the original investment, which was about $103,000 over 4 years, with a cash flow of, over 4 years. So more than double, fully turnkey, fully managed deal. Now, what's interesting, and I'm going to break this down a little bit, what's interesting about what we do is that this strategy, the rent-to-own strategy, is about the people first and the property second. And as we know, in traditional real estate, investors are focused on the property. Where do I find the property? What market? What size? How much do I pay for it? And you're kind of obsessed with the numbers on the property. Well, in a rent-to-own, for it to be successful, you have to be kind of, well, at least we chose this path. We focus on the people first. Who are the people that need this solution? And how do we create success for them? And what kind of a property is it going to take? And then the numbers follow. So let me just break that down a little bit. So the people first side of a rent to own means that you're helping a family who went to a bank today and can't get a mortgage. They are falling short on down payment, they're falling short on credit, or sometimes a combination of the two. And credit could be, you know, they're not necessarily deadbeats. They're not people that are habitual late payers. They might just be new to the country. They might maybe they never used credit very much. They owned credit cards but didn't bother using them. There's a lot of people that don't like to use credit. They prefer to use their debit card. And that has a double-edged sword. You control your finances better, but when you go to apply for a mortgage, if you don't have, you know, 2 credit cards that you use on a regular basis, the banks will turn you down because you don't have enough payment history for them to trust you to give you a mortgage. So there's a lot of these circumstances out there that challenge people when they walk into a bank. They don't quite fit the perfect square box that the banks have in terms of lending criteria. So these people have a down payment. So they've been saving. Most of them have about 5% saved up. They walk into a bank confidently thinking they'll get a mortgage, but the bank says no. Those are perfect candidates for rent to own because they bring in a down payment into the equation. They're not paying first and last month's rent. They're giving me, the investor, a 5% down payment. That offsets how much capital I have to put into the deal. That gives me a little bit of security. And I'll explain that side of it. But when they enter this type of an agreement, they're also taking on the responsibility of maintenance and repairs on the property. So I don't have to worry about, will they look after the property? Will they do the landscaping? Will they turn off the faucets and light switches? They are on the hook. the same way they would be if they were homeowners. So they have that pride of ownership. And because they're going through this rent-to-own process, they're not tenant mentality, they're home buyer mentality. They just need a break. They just need a little bit of time to fix the credit blemishes or build up a bigger down payment or both through this rent-to-own process so that they can then make you an offer and buy that property 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. Most rent-owns take 36 months to complete. Sometimes if someone has gone through a bankruptcy or consumer proposal, they might need 4 years to go through this process. And that was the case with this Mississauga family. So very common nowadays is affordability is difficult, right? We see real estate values going up and up and up. So in this particular case, we have a young couple, full-time employed, and they have decent credit. And unfortunately, their income was not enough for them to purchase a property in Mississauga. So they went to their brother-in-law, to the brother-in-law, the brother of the husband. Okay. And they said, hey, will you go in on this property with us? There's lots of bedrooms, everyone will have enough space, and it's a starter home, and we'll all be able to build up some equity. And the brother-in-law said, yeah, I will. However, the brother-in-law is new to the country. He is applying for his permanent residency. So although the couple themselves have great credit, they don't have enough income to qualify for the mortgage. So they needed the brother's income. But the brother doesn't have the credit because he's still applying for his or waiting for his permanent residency to come in. Yeah. Great people. They're just stuck in a little bit of a rut right now. So instead of sitting out on the sidelines, they want to get their foot into the real estate market. Yeah. They know the value is going up. They know that they'll be priced out of the market if they don't do something now. So they're taking
I do want to make, pardon me for interrupting, Rachel. I do want to make a little side note. Last week we had on the call David Grossman. He's a mortgage broker that offers primarily what he calls alternative financing. So this is also a good lesson for people. Obviously, some people may be able to get served by going outside the banks. Unfortunately, a lot of people out there don't even know that those options are available. What Rachel provides is, and in the case that they even went to a mortgage broker and they were still told no, this is where someone like Rachel comes in and says, hey guys, we have another solution for you. So for those people who are really not able to get a mortgage at the bank, they're not able to get a mortgage even at what we would call a B lender or you know, what David does, which is alternative financing. That's where there exists this other solution that Rachel provides. And I'll let you continue, Rachel.
Absolutely. That's a really great point. This is a solution for people who get turned down by the banks, but can't quite qualify for private financing or don't really have the down payment for a second mortgage. You know, remember, they scraped together 5%. And in this case, this family had a combined household income of about $134,000. So they needed each other in order to qualify, but because all of them are at different stages of their credit situation, rent to own helps them level out all of the shortfalls so that they can become mortgage ready. So basically they qualified for a program based on their affordability, and then they go house hunting. And that's what we do. We help them find the property. So once we figure out the people factor, we now turn our focus to the property. And the property is where the investor side of it comes in. So we as investors have security because we are on title. We're in first position. We own the property. We usually all qualify with 20% down with A lender rates. So it gives us total control of the asset. I love that. Out of all the different strategies out there, this one cash flows and this one gives me control. Bang, I love it. And on top of that, we have more leverage because the tenant buyer is coming in with 5% down. If I have to tie up 20% down payment and they're giving me 5%, I'm only tying up 15%. Yeah. I have more leverage, which brings up my ROI. And then of course I have the benefit of the cash flow. And here's the interesting part. A lot of people think, okay, well, the cash flow is so rich. How are you're gouging these people? You're charging them ridiculous, you know, rent, and this is not fair. And that's why people resist the rent to own strategy. And yes, maybe there are some unscrupulous investors that might have done it that way. However, the cash flow in our model comes from helping this family build up a bigger down payment. Because remember, they're coming in with, in this case, these guys came in with $27,000.
Which is not small money. I mean, if they were looking to live in Niagara Falls, that might have been enough for them for a down payment, but they want to live in Mississauga. They work in Mississauga. For whatever reason, they want to live in Mississauga. They need that more expensive property, so $27,000 is not going to cut it. And plus, they had this other issue.
remember, there's closing costs on top of that. And if they're scraping together 27,000, they're not going to have closing costs. And that's going to keep them out of the market even longer, feeling like they have to keep spending money on rent and never getting ahead. So these guys are changing the focus. And the cash flow essentially comes from us helping them build up that initial down payment. So they're coming in with 27,000. Our goal is to help them more than double that amount by the time they finish the rent to own process, so that they become a lot more stable as borrowers, and banks, lenders are now more than happy to talk to them, and they have many more options than they do today. And because they're building up a bigger down payment, they're paying a portion over and above the rent. And the rent is really carrying costs and a little bit of buffer. The real cash flow comes from helping these people save more. It's kind of like a forced savings process. Now, all of this money that they're putting in also adds a lot of peace of mind to the equation for the investor that owns this property, because their initial 27,000 is not refundable, and neither are the monthly down payment credits that are part of that cash flow. So these tenants, or we call them tenant buyers, they're very invested financially and emotionally, because they get to go house hunting and pick a property. They're very invested financially and emotionally to their own success, because if they mess up, if they stop paying, they lose those credits, because the investor went out on a limb, took a chance on this family, and is giving them a shot at owning that property, tying up their good credit, tying up their own capital, and giving this family a shot. And in exchange, the money is not refundable. And we have legal contracts to this effect.
Yeah.
So everybody knows exactly what they're in for.
Yeah, this is a perfectly legal arrangement. It's been done. And again, you know, now the difference between you and other people out there who are not as experienced or not as well-intentioned, and I don't want to, you know, the people that I know in this space are all very conscious, and they do their best to help their tenant buyers. But at the end of the day, how it works is, you as the investor, you purchase the property, and then you enter into a rent-to-own agreement with the tenant buyers, who are this family who ultimately wants to own this property. Now, over a 3 to 4 year agreement, they build up enough down payment, they build up their credit, they are now in a position to now go to a bank and qualify for a mortgage. So at year 3 or 4, there's a handover that happens, right? Now, Rachel is talking about, well, if for some reason during this process they stop paying or something happens, well, you as an investor have a lot more protection than somebody who is simply just purchasing a property and then has regular tenants in there. Because your regular tenants, we've unfortunately, if you've done any real estate investing, there are some tenants that don't take care of the property. They stop paying rent, and then you have to deal with that, and you have no buffer. Whereas here, these people have given you a 5% down payment, and every month they are paying above the market rent, and those are credits towards their ultimate down payment that they're going to need to actually qualify for a mortgage at year 3 or 4. But if they all of a sudden stop paying, well, you now have all this extra buffer that they've given you, and they're in a position to forfeit those deposits. And they understand that full well when they get into this agreement. They understand they're not just tenants, they're tenant buyers. This is meant to ultimately be their property. And they have to take care of it, and they have to take care of the relationship. In other words, keep making the payments. And you better believe they're very invested to do so. So for you as an investor, there's a lot more protection. And I don't know if you're going to talk, Rachel, about the property maintenance aspects of things and how this is different from, you know, a regular tenant relationship. Would you please explain a little bit about that and how that gets covered in the rent-to-own contract?
So the best way to look at this is, you as the investor own the property that these people are renting to own. And part of the arrangement of you trusting them to do so is that their down payment is not refundable, their monthly cash flow, their monthly down payment credits are not refundable. And on top of that, they're going to maintain and repair the property as needed. And they're 100% fully responsible for all aspects of maintenance and repairs. And if they don't fulfill that part of their agreement, they nullify their down payment credits and initial down payment. Okay. So these people are basically And I know it sounds harsh, and I know when someone's listening to this for the first time, they may think, "Wow, this sounds like a harsh arrangement." But think of it this way: when you get a mortgage from a bank on your personal residence, and there's a leaky toilet, do you call your bank to say, "Hey, I know you hold the mortgage on my property, and I'm your client, but can you just send somebody over to deal with that leaky toilet or that leaky faucet or that the roof repair or come mow my lawn?" You don't call your lender or your mortgage provider to deal with any maintenance and repairs. So in this case, we're kind of like the bank. We're just doing it in a private context. So
sorry, I forgot. I lost my thought earlier. I hope you're not going to lose your thought. What I want to say, sorry, Rachel. What I want to say is that what makes you a good rent-to-own investor and provider of this type of solution is that you actually you have a team of people that works with the tenant buyers to make sure that come year 3 or 4, they're going to be in a position to qualify. Now, there are some unethical rent-to-own providers out there who are all too happy to receive that down payment from the tenant buyer, receive those down payment credits, but really, if you're not at the same time working with these people to make sure that at year 3 or 4, they're really going to be in a position to be able to transfer ownership in their name, in other words, qualify for a mortgage. So there are some unscrupulous people out there, and that has potentially given the whole niche a bad name. But you're not one of those people. You actually work with the rent-to-own buyers to make sure that, to the tenant buyers, to make sure that that they are in a position to qualify for the mortgage. And you have a high success rate with that, right, Rachel? You guys have.
Yeah, absolutely. We have basically kind of an industry. We're raising the bar as far as industry standards when it comes to the success rate of rent-owns. When we got started, the success rate was about 50%.
Oh my
That's
goodness.
what other people are reporting. So only 50% of the families that were going through this rent-to-own process were able to actually complete it successfully and take ownership of the property and achieve the goal of home ownership, which they set out to do. And when my husband and I, we really, again, started from the perspective of how do we help these people achieve their goal of home ownership? And we figured if we make this program home buyer centric, everything else will take care of itself in terms of we as investors, we will see our return on investment through that process. So we set out to figure out where are the gaps? What did we have to fill? And one of the biggest misnomers for a lot of investors was that rent-to-owns had this reputation of a set it and forget it strategy. Rent-to-owns are great because they're set it and forget it.
And
you get people in
this extra cash flow.
Yeah, you get the cash flow. People will look after your property. 3 years later, they buy it. Everything's good. Life happens. These people are in this situation because they need to maybe adjust some habits. Maybe they need to be guided a little bit, and more importantly, they need to be held accountable. So we very early on realized in order for us to be successful, we need to have an accountability factor. So it's not a set it and forget it strategy. It is a people management strategy. We're not managing a property. We're managing the people because the people pay the bills each month. And the people maintain the property each month. So unless we're managing the people, we're not getting the success rate that we wanted. So we realized very quickly that our secret sauce is going to be in managing the people. So we have a 90% success rate as a result because we have a framework to get, once they're in our program, they are given the support and the guidance that they need to pay on time, maintain the property, and do what they need to do to become mortgage ready.
That's amazing. And by the way, guys, when you work with Rachel, that is part of the service that she and her husband and their company provides. So for you as an investor, and perhaps we're gonna get into the part of what it's like actually, what's required of you as a Canadian who doesn't know more about this, who doesn't necessarily, you're not the subject matter expert, but you want to partake in some of the returns that Rachel is gonna show us. What's really required of you and how, what's involved, what's required of you. And then Rachel is going to talk about where she and her husband come in and the service they provide, because it's really, for you as an investor, it really is passive. Now, Rachel and her husband do a lot of work to make sure that the arrangement, as she explained, finalizes successfully, that these people, your tenant buyers, are indeed going to be able to execute successfully at tier 3 or 4. And again, unfortunately, there are other people out there who are not going to go that extra length to make sure that once they put that tenant buyer in place, they're going to be guided and handheld through the process of improving their credit, getting their incomes at the level that's required, and so on. Okay, sorry for interfering.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm just going to do a quick run through of some numbers for those numbers people out there. And don't worry, I'm not a numbers person. So if this
Your husband is though. I remember that.
goes over your head, you're not the only one, and you're not the first one or the last one. So you can always reach out to me, and we can talk about the numbers. I can answer your questions in more slow motion. But for the purposes of the ones that are the numbers oriented. So I just want to kind of walk you through kind of the different aspects of a typical deal. So the first aspect of this type of a deal is that there's an investment. You have to think about, okay, can I actually, as an investor, take on a deal to help this family rent to own this property in Mississauga? So it all starts with what can you qualify for as an investor, and what kind of capital are you going to be working with in order to make this happen? So remember, this is a 48-month deal. It's fully managed, fully turnkey, and the only thing the investor has to do in this case is take on a mortgage, and they usually get A lender rates, and they usually have 20% down, and I'll show you how those numbers come together. So as far as the investment goes, you have to kind of think, okay, can I purchase a price at $560,000? And all investors should at some point talk to a mortgage professional. I know Letitia has great recommendations. Investors, ideally, mortgage professionals that work with investors. That's a key step.
Yes.
Really
Yes.
important.
So someone like David, some of the other people like I had on my call earlier, Sarah McComet, David Grossman, those are amazing mortgage brokers that work with investors. Dalia Barsoom is another one that Rachel and I know and we've worked with. You want to know, if you're interested in getting in this sort of scenario, you need to know, okay, can I even buy a property? Can I qualify for the mortgage? What kind of mortgage can I qualify for? Because that will also dictate, okay, this is the kind of tenant buyer we're going to be looking for. And perhaps once we know what you're able to qualify for, what availability you have in terms of down payment funds. And remember, we're going to need that 20% down on whatever, because this is an investment property for you, okay? This is not the property you're going to be living in. These other people are going to be living in it. So the requirement from lenders is 20% down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And a lot of people ask me, well, do I still need 20% down if those tenant buyers are coming in with 5%? And the answer is yes. Yes, you do. Because to qualify for your own financing, you need to satisfy your lender's criteria. They don't care that you're going to be getting an injection of 5% from the tenant buyer. They don't care that you're doing a rent to own and then there's this, background agreement. They just want to know, can you, as an investor, qualify to purchase a $560,000 property? But behind the scenes, you're getting $27,000 from the tenant buyer as a down payment from the day that you take ownership of that property. So that money is in hand. So basically, when you do the numbers on closing, as an investor, the investor is only tying up about $103,000, $103,300 in this case, after they've received the $27,000 from the tenant buyer. So that's kind of the investment. Now, the monthly cash flow comes from, I was saying, kind of a monthly payment that consists of the rent. And in this case, the tenant buyer is paying a rent of about $2,500. And they're also building up their down payment. So their $27,000 has to grow. And the best way to make it grow is to force their savings. So on top of the rent, they're paying another $650 in forced savings towards the purchase of this property. So basically what they're doing is they're saying to these investors, listen, I really want to own this property that you're going to be selling. I have $27,000 for you today. And the other part of my down payment is going to come to you incrementally as $650 for the next 48 months. Are you good with that? And of course, the investor says yes, and that's how we have this deal. So $650 is their monthly credit towards the future purchase. After you take into account mortgage, taxes, insurance, the property is, the carrying costs are about $2,100. So that's what the investor has leaving their bank account. But remember, they're getting an injection into their bank account of $2,500 plus $650 down payment credit. So the investor from that account, the investor pays the $2,100 for carrying costs. Now, this is a condo. There are condo fees for those of you who heard me talking earlier, because we are like a bank. As investors who own a rent-to-own property, we're like a bank. So does the bank pay our condo fees? No.
Nope.
The tenant buyer pays the condo fees.
Oh,
so that's why we don't account for
really?
the condo fees in these numbers, because it's the
Wow.
tenant buyer's responsibility.
Wow, that's
So
amazing
remember,
if you can negotiate that, because ultimately they are the maintenance fees are, oh my gosh, sorry for the noise. They are they're part of the deal for living in this property. There's maintenance. Sometimes it includes the internet. Sometimes it includes like access to the common facilities and so, well, typically includes access to the common facilities. So ultimately they are benefiting from living there. So it makes sense that they would be paying that at the end of the day, right?
absolutely.
And
It's
even
like
if this was a regular condo rental that you had and you had a tenant in there, yeah, you better believe that you'd want the rent coming in to cover the maintenance fees. You're not, as the owner, you're not living there, you're not benefiting from all that. You would want the rent to be covering that. So absolutely, it makes sense that in this case also, the portion that the tenant buyers paid towards the rent would cover the maintenance fees as well.
Exactly. So once you take into account what's coming into your bank account and what's going out of it, the monthly cash flow is about $1,023. And annually, that adds up to about $12,276 in monthly cash flow. Now, one thing I just want to point out, that the cash flow is really oftentimes tied to the financing side of it. So the lower your cost of borrowing,
Sure.
the higher your cash flow. So in this case, we are estimating that it's an 80% loan to value, it's a 3% mortgage, and it's a 30-year amortization, because 30-year am helps boost the cash flow.
It helps lower your mortgage payment, therefore you're going to have higher cash flow coming in.
Exactly.
Now, Rachel explained to me that she works with investors that are already high income earners, doctors, lawyers, what have you. They don't necessarily care to have the very high cash flow. What they like about this strategy is how headache free it is for them as an investor. They don't have to deal with tenant phone calls at 12 a.m. because there's a leak or what have you. Now, if there are any of those maintenance issues, first of all, tenants are supposed to deal with it. If it's something more serious, who do they call, Rachel? Do they call the investor buyer or do they call you guys?
No, so the tenant buyers really don't deal with the investor directly. They deal with our company. We are kind of in the front lines and we filter any of their concerns. And most of the time, we refer them back to the rock solid contracts that we have to say, you're on the hook for dealing with this. And of course, this is still about relationships. And if it's something that they might not have the money to deal with right now, we find ways to help them offset it. And it could be something like we add extra money on the back end when they're exiting. So instead of buying the property for, the predetermined amount, which I'll talk about in a second, if there's an expense that they couldn't afford, well, they'll pay for it on the back end. So there's different ways of negotiating situations, but yes, the responsibility of all maintenance and repairs expenses falls on the tenant buyer, and we deal with them directly. Our investors don't really have to get into the weeds of it.
That's awesome, Rachel. Thanks for clarifying that. And I want to also say that the properties that you guys are buying, as you said, these are move-in ready properties. These are not properties that need a lot of repairs. These are not fixer-uppers. These are move-in ready properties. So somebody else, the previous owner of the property, already cleaned things up, made it nice and new. So really, in a short time frame of 3 to 4 years, you should not expect to have any major maintenance issues with this property, which is another peace of mind, headache-free aspect of this type of investing. You're dealing either with new properties or properties that are already in good shape, move-in ready. Correct, Rachel?
Absolutely. That's a really important consideration. And we do inspections at the beginning to make sure that we're not getting involved with a money pit. And I would say, not 95% of the properties pass inspection, but there have been properties that did not pass inspection and we had to walk away and the tenant buyer had to continue house hunting.
Yeah.
And that's great. We
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Thanks.
So
Thanks for
one of the
clarifying
things that
that.
I also want to comment on the cash flow component. So sometimes people are overwhelmed with how expensive real estate values are. And if they're just new to investing in real estate, they'll say, well, where the heck am I going to come up with $103,000 to help this family rent to own a condo in Mississauga? So one of the things that a lot of us in the GTA have found, when you own property in the GTA, your personal residence has probably gone up in value, kind of in tandem with the real estate market values going up. So that it has a benefit in it because you have equity in your property. And a lot of investors, including myself, and this is how I got started over 11 years ago, is that I refinanced my personal residence and I had equity sitting in it back then. And over the years, I've been able to keep on doing that equity refi component, pulling out capital out of my property and investing it in real estate. So we call this the home equity line of credit, and a great mortgage agent can explain all of the ins and outs of it. But for our purposes, I just want to kind of say, if I was doing a deal like this, I'd probably be using my home equity line of credit to come up with the initial $100,000 to acquire this property. Now, my home line of equity would have an interest rate associated with it. So I'd have to pay each bank, the bank, a monthly interest fee to use that $100,000 for 4 years. So even if we were to take the interest rate on borrowing the down payment funds from my home equity line of credit, the cash flow would probably still be at about $730 a month. We ran the numbers and it would be about $700 a month. So that's basically, you're making $700 a month in cash flow without using any of your money. You've got only the bank's money tied into the deal, and you have total time freedom, no tenants, no toilets.
Yeah, Rachel, I think you're making a fabulous point. And one thing I wanted to add is, the traditional wisdom people have had is when you get a mortgage on your home, on your principal residence, the traditional wisdom goes, oh, pay down your mortgage, pay down your mortgage as soon as possible. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. What investors have realized is like, wow, okay. And we've always been told that your home is your biggest asset, but, there was a book written about 20 years ago, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which really turned that on its head and said, your home is providing you with a beautiful living space, that's great, but it's actually not putting any cash flow in your pocket. Every month, in you paying the mortgage on your principal residence and any maintenance and other expenses that you have, you're just paying money to the bank. It's taking money away from your pocket. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. So what this strategy allows for, and really, this strategy, the idea of leveraging your home equity. So you may say, well, yeah, I want to pay down your mortgage, then I'm not going to have a mortgage anymore. Okay, but you also don't have extra money coming into your home, So if and by paying down your mortgage on your principal residence, you could look at it as the equivalent of earning a 3% return on your money, because right now mortgages, you can get mortgages sometimes at less than 3%. So yeah, okay, it's great to get 3% on your money. Would you like to see how you could get a lot higher return on your money? So what Rachel is talking about is, okay, rather than you getting that 3% of the money by paying down your mortgage, what about you access some of that home equity, put a down payment on an investment property? In this case, this particular strategy that Rachel employs happens to have very high cash flow, and it has all these other benefits of not having to deal with the tenant hassles and so on. And you're going to be getting a much higher return on investment. So even if, yes, you still have to pay that 3% to the bank on the $100K that you borrowed, for example, but how much extra are you now getting in? And Rachel will show us kind of what kind of expected ROIs you can have with this strategy.
Absolutely, yeah, great point.
Investment, ROI, return on investments, like what kind of rates of return you can expect. And again, she's not allowed to legally say, oh, this is what you can get. She can only show you, hey, we just did a deal. These are the numbers that we saw. And she has many deals like that on her record that she can show you, okay?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a great sample of a recent deal, but a lot of the deals that we have been doing kind of over the years in general have been very similar. Lately, we're seeing higher cash flow and I'm seeing higher returns on my deals because the interest rates are so low and there's a lot
Oh,
more
okay.
flexibility.
I was wondering about that because you're thinking like property prices haven't gone down. How is that possible? But the interest rates are so low. It's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, cost of borrowing goes down, cash flow shoots up, and so does the ROI.
Makes sense.
And in the process, we're helping a home buyer build up a down payment. So this is not just a one-way benefit. This is not just about the investor side making $1,000 a month. We are helping these home buyers not only get into a home sooner than they would have been able to. They're also building up a forced savings of $650 through this process, and they're getting the support they need to overcome their barriers to home ownership. So this is truly where I like to show the win-win. Now, I'm going to walk very quickly through the other part of the profits. So rent-to-owns are traditionally making profits in the cash flow component, but they're also making a profit in the capital gain side. So there's kind of two profit centers. And in this case, the capital gain comes from selling the property to these home buyers in the future. So we lock in today what they're going to be paying for this condo in 2024 when they exit the deal. So we've locked in the future purchase price for them is $663,649. They've approved it. It's in the contract. It's locked in. Now we all know, and it's fully transparent, what we're working towards. At the end, fast forward to 2024, there's going to be a mortgage balance for the investor to pay off. So they're going to have about $408,735 on that mortgage. They have to pay themselves back, right? So the investor to put in $103 at the beginning. So this is where that capital is recaptured. And if this was borrowed through a home equity line of credit, this is when it gets paid back in principal. The tenant buyer in the process has accumulated $58,200. So remember, they came in with $27,000 at the beginning. Each month, they were paying $650 per month to build up that down payment. And poof, 4 years later, they're at $58,200, which puts them in a much stronger position to qualify for financing. So you have to give that as a credit to them. There's going to be some closing costs at the back end, legal fees and some disposition fees. And when you kind of put it all together, the profit from the sale is about $82,414. So that's the capital gain component. So now if you kind of put the total profit piece, you're kind of calculating your profits from the cash flow. So remember, the cash flow was about $12,000 a year for 4 years, which is about $49,000. The profit from the sale is about $82,000. Combined, we get $131,518 in total profit. So tying up $103,000 for 4 years is about 32% return on investment at 80% loan to value, 3% interest.
Yes, it's just, oh my goodness, Rachel. I mean, I know that almost sounds too good to be true for some people. And I'm gonna ask you the question shortly as to how do you guys get paid? And like that's a logical question that people will want to know the answer to. Before I do that though, I just had a quick follow-up question. The 49K here, does that include the 27,000 that they gave you at the beginning as an initial down payment? Okay.
Yeah, so this factors in the credit that they get back at the very end, yes.
Okay. And then you said that in the case of this particular deal, they came up with the 5% down to begin with, and then do you help them, what number do you help them build towards at year 3 or 4? Like is it 5%, 15%, is it 10%, 15%? What number is that?
It's a great question. So we try to get them to anywhere from 8% to 10% of the future purchase price. And it also depends what their personal situations are. When they're first-time home buyers, they also have access to some credits that the government extends
Absolutely.
to first-time home buyers. But they have to qualify for financing in order to access all of that government support. So once we get them there, they can take advantage of all of the first-time home buyer credits that are available to them. So in some cases, they're good with an 8% down payment plus the additional government programs that they can tap into. In other cases, they don't have access to those government programs, so we get them to the 10% of the future purchase price. So every situation is a little bit different. Our program is really 80% customized and 20% standardized.
Interesting, Rachel. And then finally, explain to us what happens at tier 3 or 4. And by the way, when Rachel talks about this, the capital gain component, so as she explained, the future purchase price is predetermined at the beginning of the contract. And how that happens, and I understand this because Rachel has explained this to me and other investors in the space. The idea is you assume an acceptable appreciation rate for that property. So we know that, you know, passive appreciation rate on real estate in Canada historically is like 4.9%, something like that. Now in the GTA in recent years, we've seen much higher appreciation rates, but we want to be conservative, especially in this kind of market conditions that we're in right now. Who knows what's going to happen? But we can be conservative and estimate, well, there's going to be some level of passive appreciation. Maybe we're not going to be seeing 10%, 15%, or what have you, what we were seeing before COVID or what have you. So you take into account a conservative appreciation rate. Now, the reality is the property could still appreciate at a higher rate than that. And you know, in this case, the tenant buyer gets to profit as well. Makes sense? Because, yeah, in other words, that property that they're now buying from you for $662, by that point in time, the current market value could actually be higher than that. But you know, you guys have an agreement, you're happy with your level of profit. It's a win-win for everybody. It's a win-win across the board. And then, sorry, I didn't. So then what happens, Rachel, at year 3 or 4, how does the ownership transfer happen? Again, then this maybe is a technical question, but I just want people to know. I believe it's something like writing a letter. Or how does it happen?
Absolutely. The paper trail is really important in this case because that's when everything kind of comes to the surface. How was this deal put together? Where's the paper trail of the initial $27,000 down payment? How were the 650 monthly credits accounted for? So all of this stuff is really what kind of the has to be tracked and put into a file. And we have a mortgage agent in the deal right away. So we have a mortgage agent that's tied to the situation. They understand the story. They have the file. They have the the paper trail. And then they basically shop that buyer's file to a bank. And they pitch the bank on these people getting a mortgage the same way that anybody else would qualify for a mortgage. And then really at the very end, as far as the investor goes, it's kind of a lawyer-to-lawyer transaction because we already know what price point has been negotiated. We know pretty much the timeline of when this offer is going to be coming in. So the tenant buyers have a lawyer. Their lawyer puts together an offer, and that offer is presented to the lawyer of the investor, and it becomes a lawyer-to-lawyer transaction. So for a lot of investors who have done real estate transactions, they lose money on the back end because they have to use a real estate agent.
Yeah.
There are the realtor fees here, so that, of course, contributes to the profitability factor here.
Got it. Beautiful. And then I guess I just have sort of a technical question because they've paid you the down payment money. In other words, they've been, now they're going to go to a bank normally, and it's just a technical question. So I'm trying to wrap my mind around how the transfer happens because you were the original investor. You bought the property. They gave you the down payment credits. Now they're going to go to a third party bank and try to qualify for a mortgage. Isn't that bank going to ask them for actual down payment money? Or do you get what I'm asking?
Yeah, I understand. So it's very similar to when you buy a property from a builder. So when you buy a property from a builder, you have to pay the builder, 5% in the first 30 days. Yeah. Then you pay them another 5% 60 days later, another 5% 6 months later, and so on and so forth. So the builder collects your down payment in increments. And at the end, say fast forward 3 years when it's time to take occupancy, you go to your bank and say, okay, the builder is now letting me take occupancy. And now the builder has to present paperwork that shows that they've received my down payment over the course of the last, 3 years while they were under construction. Okay. It's the same principle.
Wow. Amazing. That's amazing. And that in itself will satisfy the bank. The bank doesn't need to see, they don't need the down payment. They just need to know that the down payment has been paid. And yeah, because at the end of the day, yeah, I get it. The builder example that you gave is really good because everybody out there has come across pre-construction condos and they understand their concept. You're paying the down payment to the builder, and then at the end of the day, you have to qualify for a mortgage at the bank, but you're not paying an additional amount of down payment to the bank. The down payment has already been paid, so the builder just has to show paperwork that yes, these people have paid me the full 20%. Similar, exactly. So this works exactly the same way, and it's perfectly acceptable and perfectly legal, and it's just a matter of keeping track of the paperwork to show that, yes, look, here's all the proof they paid me. I have proof that these people have paid me this much down payment so far.
Exactly. The paper trail is super important, as are the contracts. Don't get me wrong. There's an entire paper trail that involves not just the transactional path, but also the contractual components. And the contracts have to be rock solid. And it's taken us over a decade to keep perfecting our contracts. I mean, they're pretty strong as is, but we're enhancing our contracts with every deal. And with every new nuance in the marketplace, we also, factor that into the contract. So the combination of contracts and a paper trail is really what creates a winning transaction on the back end to enable those tenants to be able to qualify for a mortgage and then ultimately have a successful sale or purchase on that property, and the investor exits the deal successfully and ideally redeploys their funds and keeps helping more Ontario families get into home ownership through our program.
Absolutely. So there will be, once the sale is completed, this is what Rachel talks about, the capital gain. This is no different than you owning a property for 4 years and then having to pay capital gain. The only difference here is.
Oh, you muted yourself. Sorry.
I have some background noise. Yeah, so you're going to be whatever that predetermined sales price was, you have to declare to the government, yeah, I bought this property for $550, I sold it for $660, whatever the predetermined sales price was, you're going to have to put capital gains tax on that. That's no different than any other real estate transaction. And the good news is, capital gains are taxed at a preferential tax rate. It's the best, it's the, preferential tax treatment. So whatever leftover profits you have the option of, maybe paying down your line of credit, but then why would you want to do that when you can make this kind of money? You might as well, you'll have the opportunity, if you choose to perhaps redeploy your funds on your next deal. And Rachel tells me she has people that have, this person was on a 4th deal already with her of helping more families do the same, basically.
Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
So we've covered a lot. Is there anything else that you think, I don't know if you have any further slides for us, Rachel?
I think one of the biggest questions that a lot of investors ask me is where can we do rent-own investing? And not everyone wants to go into the GTA because the GTA can be a little bit
pricey.
And we've worked with over 400 home buyers, and believe me, their affordability doesn't allow them to buy in the GTA, especially as affordability starts to diminish. So in reality, we work in all parts of Ontario, Southern Ontario, but specifically we concentrate on the top investment towns that have been designated by the Real Estate Investment Network. And they do extensive research and they look at, 36 different economic and market indicators to determine which towns are going to appreciate, which towns are going to be the ones where values are going to hold the strongest. So this is just a sample of the different towns where we have rent-to-owns, multiple rent-to-owns, and then all of the neighboring towns. So as affordability starts to diminish in Toronto, perfect example, we're in Mississauga.
Yeah.
Exactly. As affordability starts to diminish in Ottawa, we're doing more deals in Kingston. So there's a lot of kind of variances that really where we invest is determined by the affordability of the tenant buyer. That is probably the number one success factor. If we get them into a property in an area that's affordable and matches their lifestyle needs, then we will have that much more engagement and that much more commitment. So this is a very popular question they get. So that's why I thought I'd throw this in there.
Sure, absolutely.
And remember, these properties, like you were saying earlier, are move-in ready. So there's no hammers, there's no contractors, and this is designed to cash flow from day one. So the properties have to be in move-in ready condition and require little maintenance.
Yeah, no, I love it, Rachel. And by the way, guys, when it comes to, okay, we should address the question of how you guys get paid. I mean, people are like, okay, well, how do you guys make money? You're setting me up. So in other words, the service you provide for the for the tenant buyers is that you match them. You're almost like a matchmaker. You match the investor buyer who has the capital. They like what they're seeing. They like what they're seeing in terms of numbers. They like the idea of investing in real estate with less of the headaches and with higher cash flow than they would otherwise be able to get. So they're like, the investor says, okay, I'm ready to go. And then on the other hand, you have aspiring home buyers that, you know, oh, I would love to buy a home, but look, this is my situation. I don't have enough down payment. I don't have enough. So you somehow have to market to both of those. And then how do you match them? Like, is it and how do you get paid?
So we charge a flat fee, basically to provide our service and our expertise. And in the process, really the majority of the profits are passed on to the investors. So over the years, the investors that we've worked with have generated the bulk of the profits associated with owning these rent-owned properties and helping these families, while our company essentially makes a flat fee to do the matchmaking. We screen the home buyers, we vet the properties, we put all the contracts together, and then we manage the relationship with those buyers all the way through. We don't participate in the deal. We're not a joint venture partner. All the profits stick with the investor. And I mean, we have about 100.
Generous, I should say, Rachel. I happen to know, I mean, and I'll tell you guys, anybody watching this, most other investors in this space, when they do all this amount of work that Rachel and her husband do, they're gonna wanna participate in the profit. So instead of you getting that 32% ROI, you'd be getting about half of that, okay? Which is still an amazing return on investment compared to you having money in mutual funds at the bank. Let's, you know, unless, you know, I don't know, you have some stockbroker genius or, you know, but it's still a really good return on investment. But I mean, the way Rachel structures her deals is really generous compared to other providers of the service. And not to badmouth anyone, but I mean, if you can make more money versus less, which would you rather choose, you know? So, you know, thank you, Rachel, for doing that. And again, it's a flat fee. And who ends up, how does that even, the flat fee comes out of whose pocket? How does that even work, if I may ask?
So the flat fee comes out at the beginning. We invoice for our fees. So all the numbers that I was showing you with kind of that $1,000 cash flow, that's after our fees. The annualized kind of 32%, that's after our fees. So our fees are really not a major deal breaker. If the investor is
super reasonable
for those returns, our fees are quite reasonable. And I mean, 150 families can't be wrong. This is just a sample of some of the families that we have on our waiting list for deals. They're waiting to be matched. And the matching, back to your earlier question, really happens from what the investor's needs are. What is their affordability? Can they afford a $560,000 property, or are they limited to a $450,000 budget? And then we have to match them with tenant buyers that have a similar you know, budget. So there's, you know, the budget is a matchmaker thing. The timing is a matchmaker. Some investors can't be locked in for 4 years. They prefer a 3-year deal. Some investors want properties, you know, in Ottawa and Kingston, whereas others prefer Barrie and Aurelia. Everyone has slightly different reasons and strategies. So my goal is to try to figure out how to matchmake everybody. And I mean, at the heart of it, really the number one reason why I would work with someone versus turning some people away is that they really have to share the same integrity of wanting to help other families get into homeownership. We're families helping families. And that's really, you know, where it comes from. Our investment strategy is anchored in doing good and creating profits in the process. So I really look for that. I won't work with everybody, but the people that I've had the pleasure of working with, they, you know, they're amazing. And some of them are in this photograph.
So these, and you know, I recognize some of the faces in this picture. Hi, Anthony. Oh my God, I'm so.
Yeah, so
working from home. Oh my God, he has to embarrass me like that every single time. Anyway, I recognize some of these faces. I know, and it's amazing. So these 150 families are literally investors that have basically used your services to get into this sort of deal, perhaps more than once, like, since you have like 400 families that you've helped get into home ownership. So that kind of tells you that these are happy investors, and probably done more than a deal at a time, obviously. So, okay, Rachel, I don't want to take more of your time. I think this has been great. So what sort of waiting list do you have? Let's say somebody says, okay, I'm ready to go. Because this presentation has primarily been for investors, people that are looking to get better returns on their money and perhaps have been wanting to get into real estate, and they've been a little bit trigger shy because they're thinking, oh my God, I'm going to deal with tenants and toilets. I don't want to deal with that. I don't have time to deal with that. But if they like what you've shown them, and let's say, you know, they talk to a mortgage broker that I can put them in touch with, and they can qualify. What kind of lead time do they need with you? Like how, you know, because you said you have a waiting list. So are you even taking on new investors?
Well, it would all start with a conversation. I just need to get a better idea of what their expectations are to make sure that we're in alignment in terms of satisfying their needs. Not every investor is jumping into a deal at the same time. Not every investor can move on a deal in every price point. So the waiting list isn't always kind of one person is behind the other. Sometimes it's just a question of people kind of waiting in the wings for it to be matched with an opportunity that's going to make sense for them. So everything starts with an initial conversation. We are a people business. Like I said, we're people first, property second, and that, you know, that starts with a conversation with the investor to figure out what can we do to help them reach some of their goals, and are we a good fit to work together? And it's a simple call.
So do you have your contact info that you can provide us with? Okay, these are some of your sample. Okay, there you go. Everyone take a screenshot of that. Oh, I love your new, okay, hello cash flow. I love it. Beautiful.
Yeah, just send me a quick note at rachel@hellocashflow.ca. I'm happy to have an initial conversation to learn a little bit about what your cash flow goals are, to see if there's anything I can do to help.
Amazing. Thank you, Rachel. And you can mention to Rachel that you heard about her on Letitia's webinar. Thank you for that. And thanks again, Rachel, for joining us. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm gonna minimize the screen, or let's see.
Here, I can do this. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna go back to Facebook to see if anybody's asked any questions. Give me 1 second. No. Okay, I see a few people were watching. Amazing. I see. Beautiful. Oh, you were able to answer. That's amazing. Amazing. I love it. Okay. Beautiful. Hey, I'm really glad Luciana liked the presentation. Beautiful. Wonderful. I don't see any questions, Rachel. My little guy needs my attention, so I think we're gonna end it right here. Thanks so much again for your time and sharing your expertise with us. And I look forward to staying in touch. And thanks everyone for watching. And we'll see you soon on another edition of our Money Matters webinar. Take care. Bye for now. Bye, everyone.